Scripture reading this morning will be from Jeremiah chapter 44, 1 through 10. I'll be reading from the King James Version. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews which dwell in the land of Egypt, which dwell at Migdol and at Tahpanhes and at Noph and in the country of Pathros, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Ye have seen all the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem and upon all the cities of Judah, and behold, this day they are a desolation, and no man dwelleth therein. Because of their wickedness, which they have committed to provoke me to anger, in that they went to burn incense and to serve other gods, whom they knew not, neither they, yea, nor your fathers. Howbeit I sent unto you all my servants the prophets, rising early and sending them, saying, Oh, do not this abominable thing that I hate. But they hearken not, nor incline their ear to turn from their wickedness, to burn no incense unto other gods. Wherefore my fury and mine anger was poured forth, and was kindled in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, and they are wasted and desolate as at this day. Therefore now thus saith the Lord, the God of hosts, the God of Israel, Wherefore commit ye this great evil against your souls, to cut off from you man and woman, child and suckling out of Judah, to leave you none to remain, in that ye provoked me unto wrath with the works of your hands, burning incense unto other gods in the land of Egypt, with ye be gone to dwell, that ye might cut yourselves off, and that ye might be a curse and a reproach among all the nations of the earth. Have ye forgotten the wickedness of your fathers, and the wickedness of the kings of Judah, and the wickedness of their wives, and your own wickedness, and the wickedness of your wives, which they have committed in the land of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? They are not humbled even unto this day, neither have they feared nor walked in my law, nor in my statutes, that I set before you and before your fathers. And Brother Sikes has asked me to read 9 through 10 again for emphasis. Have ye forgotten the wickedness of your fathers, and the wickedness of the kings of Judah, and the wickedness of their wives, and your own wickedness, and the wickedness of your wives which they have committed in the land of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? They are not humbled even unto this day, neither have they feared nor walked in my law, nor in my statutes, that I set before you and before your fathers.
Have you forgotten the Sikeses? It's good to be back after a couple of weeks being abroad, and look forward to sharing with you more about the adventures that we had. We were able to be in Turkey and in Greece for a matter of 2 weeks, visiting places like the 7 churches of Asia, which Paul wrote to, even to the island of Patmos, in which he received the revelation, island of Crete and Rhodes and Santorini, to Athens, to Corinth, and so much I would love to share with you right now. I am still trying to remember all that I have learned upon that trip, and that was given to us by the different ones, but got to say how wonderful it is to be back with you here. It's just, there's no place like home, as the old adage from the Wizard of Oz, right? There's no place like good old Kansas, even for me, here at Emporia Avenue to be here with you. So glad that you were able to be here this morning. Thank you for your prayers for our safety and returning back to you. How forgetful are you? As we get older, our memory begins to slip a little bit. I am more forgetful than I used to be. Oh man, that's tough to admit. It is. What types of things do you remember? Long term? Short term? As we get older, we begin to make a distinction between the two, don't we? You do remember what you had for breakfast, right? Do women remember different things than what men do? Oh boy, do they, right? Why is that? I mean, men, we seem to remember things, I think, along the line of detail-oriented, maybe mechanical or engineering-wise, whereas women, I think, are more relationship-driven. They can remember names better. My wife can remember places and times better. She'll say to me, Jed, don't you remember that it was said whenever we were there? And I say, I don't remember that, honey. She'll say, you're there. You should remember it, in other words. But what kind of things do we remember? What kind of things do we hold as important to us? If there was a job that you carried and there was a certain step within that job that you just forgot to do, whether it's rebuilding the engine of a vehicle. How about just driving a vehicle? Anybody here drive a manual? Anybody still drive a stick shift? Yeah, hey, we got a few that still. Did you learn to drive a stick shift 3 on a tree? I got anybody that knows what the 3 on the tree is? I had an old high school buddy that had a Ford Maverick that had a 3 on the tree right there. The way I learned to drive a stick shift was Tom Norris, who I worked on his farm, said, Jed, I need you to get into the grain truck because there's a storm coming. We need to get them all to the farmhouse. Get in there and drive it to the farmhouse. I said, Tom, I don't know how to drive a stick. He said, you know how to drive a tractor? I said, well, just in the last 2 weeks. He said, get in it. It's just like that. Press in the clutch, shift it, let the clutch out slowly. Well, I didn't remember where reverse was in that pattern of everything. It's different on a tractor, and so we didn't get out of second gear and trying to get back to the house. I took it pretty slow. What if you just forget one of those steps? Let's say you just forget to hit the clutch, right? You strip the gears. What if you forget where a gear is and you throw it into reverse as you are in drive? Oh boy, that could be disastrous, couldn't it? It could even be disastrous if you were to pop that clutch loose and not to let it go smoothly, right? But we hold on to those things that are important to us. Why do we remember them? Because sometimes it can prove to be for our safety. In verse 9, Jeremiah chapter 44, God has this question for the people. He says, have you forgotten? Those who don't know history, you know how to finish that statement? Are doomed to repeat it. That was said by a man named Edmund Burke, and Edmund Burke was born in 1729, and he lived to about 1797, lived for about 68 years. And Edmund Burke was an Englishman who was in the Parliament during the time just prior to the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence on the part of the American colonies. But he was a voice within the English Parliament in favor of the American colonies' independence. That did not make him very popular amongst his own. But what he was basically saying unto those that were in Parliament is that you need to treat these folks like they're your own countrymen. You do not need to be taxing them without representation. And he was writing in about 1750 or so, okay, so about 270 years ago, and just prior to the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence, and then shortly thereafter. And he was a voice within the English Parliament that was saying that the colonies need to be treated as their own, and if you don't, they are going to no longer love our nation, and then they're going to go off on their own. Now, do you think just what transpired over the next few decades after he was writing in about 1750, that there were some people that were like, you know what, we should have listened to old Ed about those things? Were you a good history student? You say, oh man, I don't know if I liked history. Was it a bore, or did you relish in it? Well, let's just ask, how were your grades in history class? Were you barely getting by? Or were they stellar? Were you one that whenever history class they were given that chapter that you were supposed to read because it was a high school football coach that was teaching history and he just said, read the chapter and then you're going to have an assignment? Were you, no offense to history teachers who are also coaches, but you didn't do history what it deserved a lot of times within the classes that I was in. But were you able yourself to take a chapter and to read it and to make it come alive within your mind? Or was that just kind of a bore and a task for you to even accomplish the assignment? And maybe you thought amongst yourself, why do I even have to learn about all of this stuff? All these people are dead, right? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. I can remember within history class, and this is something that I've experienced on this last trip as well, is being able to, after seeing these things, make it come alive more for me. But in the South, I was in American history class, and I can remember that year we went to the battlegrounds of Shiloh, there near Corinth, Mississippi. And as we were walking the battlegrounds, we were able to see some reenactments that were done there. Probably the most impressive was the unmarked mass graves of both sides of men who fought and gave their life right there, and to see the monuments. And whenever I got back into class, kind of like right now, as I want to talk to you about all the travels that we have had and show you the picture, it just came alive for me, right? It was. Now, you think of as a student that goes into, with that frame of mind, into an endeavor like a studies class or a particular course, is that going to affect your grade? Is it going to affect your attention and your assertion within that class? Do you remember things that interest you? Those things that are most important to you. That's why we remember things that are different from women. Men do, because we have different interests. I mean, like I said, I think men that we're more goal-oriented, step one through whatever it be, right? Mechanical, it's something that I can fix and I can do. Whereas women, they seem to be more relationship-oriented, and we're so thankful for that because they are mothers too, right? Men more or less are concrete, less of the abstract. But sometimes we forget, don't we, fellas? That anniversary, that birthday, have you always remembered those dates? Have you been perfect about that? Israel has forgotten something here. What have they forgotten? Did it surprise you that within the reading that we had, it said that Israel was back in Egypt? Did you think that was a typo that was there? When does Jeremiah live whenever he says that they were back within the land of Egypt? Jeremiah prophesies beginning somewhere around 621 BC and up and through the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC. And so from the 7th century to the 6th century BC, Jeremiah has been preaching the fall of Jerusalem and of Judah from 606 primarily. That destruction culminates in 587. Okay, I just want you to keep that number within your mind, 600 BC. How many years after Moses are we? We're approximately 1,500 years after Moses. I hope that this doesn't cause you any problems whenever I bring up dates and things like this, that it doesn't disturb you. But this is a bit of the historical side, the geography side of my mind that I like. But we're approximately 900 years right now removed from the time of Moses. How long has our nation been in existence? We declared our independence on the 4th of July, 1776. 247 years ago. We're not going to get into the weeks and the months. Can you imagine a nation that has been in existence for 900 years? What is America going to be like in 900 years or the next 700 years? Is there going to be an America within 900 years? There's almost not an Israel here 900 years after Moses has delivered the people by the hand of God out of the land of Egypt, through the Red Sea, through the Jordan River. The cities of Jericho have fallen. The Canaanites have been subdued under the thumb of the Israelites. And yet 900 years later, there's only a fraction There's only a remnant that is left. 100 years prior to 721 BC, the Assyrians have assimilated the northern tribes into what now become the Samaritans. Now, during Jeremiah's time, what is the state of Judah? Its cities have fallen. Jerusalem itself, what is its state? How does it lie? It lies in ruins. The temple is destroyed. And within that very short passage that we had Steve read for us, we see that the streets are desolate. And in fact, those ones that have been left there by Nebuchadnezzar in Jericho, or in Jerusalem, they have determined the best thing for them to do is not to harvest the grapes and to pick and do those things that they were commissioned to do within the land of Canaan. But they decide the best place that they should be is back in the land of Egypt. Talk about irony, right? Here's God, and his people that he delivered out of Egypt are back in Egypt where they were put into slavery, and they are worshiping idols. They have not only let go of the promised land. Are they standing on the promises of God? No, they have fled. They are in the land of Egypt. Jeremiah said, don't go. And yet they kidnapped Jeremiah and his scribe, Baruch. And now Jeremiah finds himself in the streets of Memphis in Egypt, prophesying to a people, the very people who are now committing the very same acts that their fathers committed that landed them in trouble, but yet it's not the same gods, it's the gods of Egypt now. How does this happen? Remember, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. 900 years into the law, and the children of Israel are right now fewer in number. They are less spiritually sound, and they are refusing to honor and to glorify God. How does a nation degrade itself in such a fashion? God's question is simple. He says, have you forgotten what wickedness does? You know, there are certain things that we would be best to remember. And it's one of those things that if you come from a people who have been ignoring God, then you should remember that. Why? Why does God want me to have within my mind that my fathers did not walk in his way? Because you are experiencing the results of what happens whenever you don't. Jerusalem lies desolate. Its streets are empty. The cities of Judah are in ruin. How could all of this have happened? I don't know. I'm not a city, or I don't study history. Who knows? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat. And yet, here's the voice of God through the prophet Jeremiah trying to instill within the people those things that they are choosing not to do. They're choosing to just straight ignore. And God has already said to his people through the prophet Jeremiah, turn with me to chapter 18, look at verse 15 as to what the root of the problem is. The root of the problem is not simply that his people have disobeyed what God has said, and therefore his fathers have then received the consequences for their wickedness and the wickedness of their wives and the wickedness of the kings and their wives and whatever all that means. But yet, what is the source of the problem? Why? What is it that they have ultimately forgotten? It was to brush their teeth, right? It was to wash their hands. It was to keep the ritual. What was it that God says that you had forgotten? He said, am I ahead of myself? For my people have forgotten me. They burn incense to worthless gods, and they stumble in their ways in the ancient roads to walk on paths and not on the highway. Do you see what they are forgotten? In those first 10 verses that we had read in chapter 44, God is saying, I warned you. I sent my prophets to you again and again. Now, you listened to your parents the first time that they told you to do something, didn't you? When your mama said, you better do it, you hopped up and you did it because you know that she is right. No, you knew that if you didn't, she was going to get a hold of you. Right? And if she didn't get a hold of you, then your dad was going to get a hold of you. Why do we choose to remember what we choose to remember? Well, sometimes it serves for self-preservation. Sometimes, right? God says, my people are choosing to ignore me. Why would they do such a thing? This is the God that delivered them. This is the God with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, the great I am, the Jehovah that led them through the Red Sea and through the Jordan and subdued those nations of Canaan, that gave them vineyards in which they did not plant that they could eat from. They gave them cities and homes in which they could live in that they did not build. Gave them wells to drink from that they did not dig. And God said at that time, when you get into the land in Deuteronomy chapter 6, he says, you make sure you remember who gave you all of this and don't you forget about it. And once a year, in fact, I'm going to institute a feast. Everybody has to go camping for 1 week a year. Everybody has to go out and to live in tents so that you will remember you were a vagabond. You were a wanderer. You were the one that was a sojourner, that these things were all blessed by God unto you. And God did that. Now, women, how long does it take to live without your creature comforts before you begin to? Maybe you're one of those ladies that likes to go camping, right? But how long without running water, without our beds, without electricity? It doesn't take long, does it? It doesn't take long before we begin to long for those things and to have them again. Maybe you like and understand that this is family time. But for the most part, I think ladies go along with camping out with the men because they know that this is something that the men are going to want to do. But it doesn't take long to realize, boy, I don't want to live this way all the time. And God instructed that his people once a year would set aside 1 week. It was called the Feast of Booths, where everybody would live in tents for a week so that they would be reminded, so that they would understand, so that they would not forget. He might as well have been saying to them, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, because in spite of God's blessings, and in spite of his direction, and in spite of him sending prophets, the people have forgotten their wickedness, and the wickedness of their kings, and the wickedness of their wives, and ultimately they have forgotten about God. You remember it's Sunday. Did you remember that it's the Lord's Day? You could walk out these doors and you could ask anybody what day of the week it is, and they would tell you that it was Sunday. But what does that mean? What does Sunday mean to them? Then maybe they say, well, Sunday is my day. You know, Sunday, I am free to do what I want to do. I get to go and watch football, or I get to watch my baseball games or my golf. I get to get out on the course. I get to go fishing on Sundays. I get to go hunting on Sundays. You remember that it's Sunday. Do you remember that this is the Lord's day? We choose to remember what is important to us. 900 years, and the nation that was once strong and vibrant is now at a bare minimum, and God says, only a few of you are going to survive. There are going to be some that are able to return back to Judah after Babylonian captivity, but for the most part, most of you are going to die right here at the hand of the king of Babylon. And that nation that you ran to in order to get away from this king, he's going to follow you right down there, and you are going to die within that land. Wow. Now, wait a minute. God, does God remember who these people are? Does God not remember? These are the children of Abraham, God. Do you not remember? These are your people. These are the Israelites. Lord, the last time that we were in a predicament, Hezekiah, he prayed to you, and you sent one angel, and 185,000 of the Assyrians were destroyed in one night. Why not now? Why not being rescued now? God is not going to rescue a nation that does not honor him, does not give him the glory for the blessings that they have, and does not serve him. You're reading between the lines? A nation that will not honor God is a nation that is doomed for failure. If you begin to look into Edward Burke and some of the other things that he wrote, you will find that he wrote some pretty profound things. And some of them I'll use here just in a little bit within the lesson as well. But from centuries ago. Oh, here's one of them. But what is liberty without wisdom and without virtue? Let's just stop with that, right? Let me read that over to you again. For what is liberty without wisdom and without virtue? It is the greatest of all possible evils, for it is folly, vice, and madness without tuition or restraint. Those who know the virtuous liberty and what it is cannot bear to see it disgraced by incapable heads on account of having high-sounding words within their mouth. Wow. know that was 270 years ago, and a man can say something like that and it can still resonate with us today? What has he just said? He said, you cannot just listen to people because they are promising grand things to you or that they have smooth words. Edmund Burke, liberty without wisdom and without virtue, what is it? And 250 years ago, we see it's folly, it's vice, it's madness without restraint. If Israel, and if you think I'm on a soapbox here, I promise that I'm not. I'm really just trying to show to us what it means that God desires for us to remember. Israel is fallen because they have forgotten about God. Israel is fallen because they have now failed to attribute what blessings and benefits they have received to Almighty God. Israel is fallen because they are no longer honoring Him with their lives and obeying Him in their commandments. And it is where it is, Israel is, within the land of captivity, and they are going to die there. Because God said, I sent you my prophets who declared to you the wisdom and the virtue within the service of God, and you have rejected them. Do we really think that we are any different within our generation? Or would God not say to us, have you forgotten the wickedness of your fathers? Have you forgotten the wickedness of your kings and their wives? Have you forgotten the wickedness of yourself and your own wives? We must understand that if we do not honor God, any nation that does not honor God will fail. But any nation that desires to do what God has them will be blessed. Look back with me in Jeremiah chapter 18. We're going to pick up with verse 15, and we're going to read it in context of a couple of verses here. But just look here, the results of forgetting about God. For my people have forgotten about me. They burn incense to worthless gods. They have stumbled in their ways in ancient roads, to walk on paths not on the highway, to make their land a desolation, an object of perpetual hissing. Everyone who passes by it will be astonished. They will shake their heads. Like an east wind, I will scatter them before the enemy, and I will show them my back and not my face in the day of their disaster. The land lies in ruin. The people are held in derision by their neighbors, and they will ultimately fall into captivity and into servitude. We go from the land of promise to the land of captivity. We go from a respected nation to one that is held in derision. We go from liberty to captivity because their army wasn't strong enough, because their economy failed. Was that it? Was it because they didn't have the best and the brightest within those positions that could lead them aright? Or was it because they forgot about God? That's the very first red flag for any nation, for it to rise or for it to fall, is to know whether or not it is honoring God. Now you say, wait a minute, preacher. Rome was an ungodly nation. And it stood for centuries. Rome was an instrument of God to chastise his own people, just like Babylon was an instrument of God to chastise Judah, just like Assyria was an instrument of God to chastise those northern tribes, just as Israel was an instrument of God in order to subdue those Canaanite nations. God uses nations, he lets them rise and allows them to fall whenever they do not honor him. Even King Nebuchadnezzar, a heathen king, knew that. Just because a nation stands does not mean that it's godly, but it is going to serve God's purpose. Now, let's just pray that as a nation, we are still within the position of receiving the blessings of God and not just being used by God as a blunt force instrument and then to be cast aside by him. Our nation, maybe it stands for another 100 years. I don't know, but I guarantee you that if it is not in God we trust, then it will not be for our good. No matter how long that we might survive, that only happens when nations honor God and whenever they keep his commandments. God has asked, have you forgotten? You remember that it's Sunday. Have you forgotten that it's the Lord's day? We remember, we recall, but what do we remember? And what do we recall? Have we left out certain steps within the process and now we can't go any further? The only thing necessary for evil to triumph Oh, that was Edwin Burke again. Did you know that? The only thing for evil men to triumph is for what? For good men to do nothing. I can't change this nation. I've come to that conclusion. Neither can you. But what I can do is do my part to walk with God. I can do my part to do those things that are right. I can do my part to remember those things that are of God. I can do my part not to be led astray by the crowds. I can do my part to stand in firm where God has said, no, that is sin, and not make excuses for it, and not to bow down to your gods, your little gods of the foreign nations, forever remembering that without Christ, man is lost, that I am forever in need because I am weak and frail of his forgiveness, but it is beyond my control and my power to determine what is right and what is wrong outside of what God has declared. And I don't care how many people vote on it or how many people get together and they say it's different from. If it's not within God and if it's within man, it's not within man to direct his own steps. There is a way that seems right unto man, but the end therein leads to death. Now, I pray that what I am speaking to you this morning is what God intends for to be seen from his word from here in Jeremiah chapter 44. I have drawn from a figure in history, a politician from 270 years ago, to impress upon your mind the fact that we have to remember God. Because whenever we do, whenever we submit to him and we honor him and glorify him, then we understand that he is almighty. We understand that all things are under his control, that every nation, every power has been placed there by God, and it is for a purpose. Romans chapter 13. Acts chapter 1, don't fool yourself. We may someday, though, find ourselves within the sandals of the Romans, and God decide it's no longer time for the America to stand. Now, what I'm about to say is un-American. But if American falls, I stand with God. And I pray that you stand with me on that, even if my nation falls. Now, I want to be a good citizen, and I am going to pay my taxes unto Rome or unto the nation as I am due. But whenever there comes a conflict of interest where I am told that my allegiances must be to man rather than God, you tell me which one is better to serve. I am going to serve God. Listen, may we not forget what he has done for us. May we not forget the sacrifice that he made to forgive us of our sins, to give us an eternal home with him. He asks that you confess his name before men, and he will confess you also before his Father, which is in heaven. But if you deny him before men, he will also deny you before the Father, which is in heaven. You remember it's Sunday. Do you remember it's the Lord's day? Won't you come as we stand and sing?